I'm your host, Shane Grove. And before we get started with this episode's guest, I just want to remind everybody if you have an experience or a story you want to share, you can find us at the From the Shadows podcast on Facebook. You can find us at our forum page on Facebook called After the Shadows. You can get a hold of me at Shane Grove Author on Instagram, or our From the Shadows podcast Instagram page, or the good old fashioned way. Guess that feels weird saying good old fashioned way because it's not that really that old fashioned, but you can go to the FromTheShadowsPodcast.com, hit the contact button, and send me an email, and I'll definitely read it and reach back out to you. And because we love to have guests on. And for those of you who do not subscribe to our Patreon page, if you want some extra content every month and commercial-free episodes, you can go check us out at patreon.com. Just search From the Shadows Podcast. So I'm kind of excited about this week's guest, not only because he has a really cool first name, but he was just recently named Bigfooter of the Year in the Bigfoot Times by our good friend and former guest on the show, Daniel Perez. So with those accolades, now pretend they're in bright shining lights blinking behind him as he comes on. I want to welcome Shane Carpenter to the show. Welcome to the From the Shadows podcast, Shane.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Hey, I every month I wait for that envelope that comes from California because I know it's the monthly newsletter called the Bigfoot Times, which if people don't know it or don't subscribe to it, I would suggest checking it out. It's got a lot of good stories and articles in it. Daniel does a pretty good job putting it together. But this issue had you all over it as the Bigfooter of the Year, and I guess that's quite an honor.
Hey, yeah, I was kind of shocked. Had no idea that I was even in the running for it. I'm familiar with the Bigfoot Times. Actually, a fan of it. If you're into this subject, Daniel puts a lot of information that you don't see, out in the public side of this stuff, that like online and whatnot. He's been around for a long time. He's had conversations with all the big dogs in the past, I'm sure, and so I'm sure he's got a wealth of information in his head, and to get nominated, and just being nominated would have been cool, but to be Bigfooter of the Year, it was an honor. It was an honor.
Yeah, I'm looking at the list, and there's some, Don Keating, Renee DeHinden, Dr. Jeff Meldrum, Moneymaker, Bob Gimlin, Cliff, even Stacy Brown. Oh my gosh. Stacy Brown will be glad that we told everybody he was Bigfooter of the Year. He'll love that. That's quite a list. And but there's a reason you guys, the guys and girls that are on that list are on there. And that's because you guys are doing, have all done some really important research in the subject matter. And I gotta be honest, I had not heard much about you before reading this article, and the little bit we've got to talk and got to know each other before the show. I'm super stoked for people to hear more about you and about what you're doing, because it's pretty impressive. And I think everybody who's regular listeners of the show, and I mentioned to you, about my partner, the Ozark Howler, who does we do episodes in the middle of the week. You're from pretty close to his neck of the woods. I think a dream, it'd be a dream foursome for me to come to Missouri and get the Howler, who is the biggest skeptic around, and meet you and your partner out and take them out there, and where you guys are doing some research and maybe change his point of view a little bit. So, but with that being said, I mean, kind of tell us how you got into the subject of Bigfoot, and what what led you to being the Bigfooter of the year.
Yeah, I want to take a step back real quick if we can, and I just want to say that a lot of the people that have been named Bigfoot of the Year, they're fairly well-known people, and for several years I've been just kind of running under the radar. And like me and my partner Randy Harrington, who rightfully so deserves half of the Bigfooter of the Year, because everything that I've done he's been involved in, and vice versa, out on this property that we research on. But we've kind of been running under the radar for so long, and just doing our own thing. And a lot of the bigger names are on the West Coast, and we're down here in Southwest Missouri, and we've just been quietly doing our own research, trying to get the right people involved as far as academics, and it was, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't nice to get a little shout out, from Daniel Perez. He's been kind of quietly keeping up with what we're doing, and I think a lot of people were shocked because, I seen in some of the Facebook pages and stuff that people were going, who is this guy? Who is this guy? So that side of it was kind of cool, and it was just a good feeling to get some props from Daniel Perez, and it may be putting a little limelight on us at the moment, which is not a big deal, but it's not something we look for either. Like I said, we kind of like running under the radar, just doing our thing. We have a host of podcasts that we do, just smaller podcasts, and we're friends with the people who run the podcast, and so we've kind of stayed on the down and low, purposely. Yeah, it's easier that way, I guess you could say.
Oh, gee. Now that you're on this show, you are going to be known on every corner of the earth. In every.
I was told. That's what I was told.
Oh boy, and I will say this: like, as I read that list, it dawned on me, because we had Daniel on, and he and I have stayed in touch and have become, I would say, friends. We talk every now and then through texting and on the phone. We've talked, and I see those names, and I'm like, wow, there's Renee DeHinden and Meldrum and stuff. I'm in the middle of Ohio, and I never had a chance to meet some of those guys. Some of those guys are no longer with us, as a matter of fact, and it's like that's like for like a baseball, for a baseball analogy, that's like, you're on the list there with like Mickey Mantle and Hank Aaron and stuff like that. And so, I'm become friends with Daniel, and you're like, gosh, he had real relationships with those people, picked their brains, has gone through all their research, and it does, you got to take a step back and say, wow, okay.
And I'm just a blue collar guy down here in Southwest Missouri, so it was unexpected. But awesome nonetheless.
Let me tell you, I think once people hear what you guys have been doing, they're gonna understand that you probably will at some point, name recognition wise, which we all know that's shouldn't be what this is all for, but people are going to be like, man, that guy and your Randy are doing some cool stuff out there, and you guys should be a force to be reckoned with when it comes to real, boots on the ground research, for sure.
Well, we're definitely trying to do things that other people haven't done in the past. I say that, but I'm sure a lot of people have tried a lot of stuff, but we've kind of worked into the situation that has made it easier. You know, a little luck goes a long way. And I was brought into this property. So it was kind of, handed to us on a silver platter, per se. And picking the right people to get involved in this has been a big issue, finding the right people. And Randy was the first person that I brought in, as far as like wanting to consider somebody like a part of this team, and eventually we found Dan Nedvelo, who is a biologist that comes out with us on occasion. And then we have a guy named Gary Schutte, kind of runs the, we have a website that we haven't really started promoting yet. It's out, but we haven't started promoting it because it's not full yet. We haven't finished it completely. It's kind of a work in progress. But Gary Schutte runs that, and runs kind of he's going to be running some media stuff and whatnot, and kind of taking care of the social side and whatnot, all that good stuff. And all while getting out with us on occasion also. But me and Randy do most of this. Me and Randy do 5 and 10-day excursions. This summer we did something different, and we put Randy out there by himself. So Randy would go out he would do a 10-day excursion, and I would come out. We'd set it up to where I would come out in the middle or towards the end of it on a weekend and stay a few days with him. And it was just to try to get these things that are on the property more adept to him. I'm out there all the time. And so, we switched some things up this summer, but a lot of people are doing the same old thing that has been done over and over and over for years, trying the same old tactics. And we just decided that, we had a golden opportunity, and that we've got to try some things that haven't been done. And that's what we're doing. And we've got a little bit of backing now, as far as being able to continue forward and be able to get some different types of equipment built for us to do what we need it to do. Our goal is to prove to the world that these things are real, and without taking a body, basically. And that's going to be done by getting up close and personal on a consistent basis. And we'll have a round table of academics that we're putting together that all the evidence will go to before it ever hits the public. We've already kind of started that process. And we have another biologist that is, studying the tracks and helping us out with the tracks. I've got tons and tons of juvenile casts that we've collected over several years. And we've actually been able to cast 2 individuals, one of them 2 years in a row, and one of them 3 years in a row. So we have casts that show the same foot, and show like the morphology change and the growth. And I
was gonna ask that. So what's the rate of growth on these juveniles from year to year?
We've only been able to, thus far, as far as casting the same individuals consistently. It's the one that we casted 3 years in a row started out when I first found it, and it was 9 inches. And basically what we're seeing between these 2 juveniles, from 9 inches up, there's a growth rate of about 1 inch to 1.25 inches a year.
Okay. And so they're up to about what, 12 or 13 then now? Is that what you're?
Yeah. Well, I couldn't tell you now because the situation has changed. The 2 juvies that were there on the property are no longer there, and there's 2 other younger individuals there now.
Oh, okay. I got
with
you.
the 2 adults. It's a family situation. And so we basically spent 4 years tracking and, trying to basically habituate this group and the two juveniles that were interacting with us have since left and gone. At least, I mean, we're not finding their tracks anymore, and I would expect that I would have already found their tracks this summer if they were gone. So all this happened this summer, and there's a younger one that was there when they were there also, and its tracks are now about 9.5 inches, and now we have one that is leaving 6-inch tracks. So our focus is going to be on the youngest one because that gives us more time to habituate it. It gives us more possible tracks to focus on from year to year, collecting a longer term growth rate than we've been able to collect. So we should be able to get definitely more vigorous data, being able to cast these 6-inch tracks versus starting at 9 inches and moving forward, if you follow me.
Yeah, because then I think if I'm following along correctly, it seems that maybe once these reach a certain age, they're kind of pushed away and say, okay, go find your own area. And you're talking maybe when they're, just for the sake of not knowing how old they really are, but when their footprint reaches maybe 12, 13 inches, they're maybe old enough that they can go off on their own. So
yeah, the situation there, we had what we assumed was a mother, and she had 12-inch tracks. We assumed that because the juvenile tracks would always be with these 12-inch tracks. Those 12-inch tracks they're 14-inch. They're 14-inch tracks now, but at the time they were 12. And so we wasn't sure if it was an older sibling or if it was the mother. Now I think we understand correctly that it probably is the mother because she's still there. We still find her tracks, and assuming it's a her, of course. A lot of this is assumption, but we're just trying to build a picture off of the data that we collect. So sometimes we prove ourselves incorrect, and we change that, at times, of course, but just all kind of part of it. You got to form a process around the possibility and move forward. You got to pick a possibility and move forward. So we try to follow our data as much as we can, but there are a lot of assumptions going into it, of course, too. But so yeah, those me and Randy actually last year had discussed the possibility that these two juveniles at some point may come to an age where, say, the female juvenile starts ovulating. In the animal world, if you think these things are a type of animal or an ape, typically when they start ovulating, they're going to be looking to breed, or a male is going to be looking to breed with them, right? And we don't know how their family structure works, as far as whether they just leave the family and go look for a male, or if they may already have a male set up for them, or what. But we were kind of prepared for this to happen at some point, and it seems as though it happened, this spring, that spring of 2022. So immediately we started, finding the what was the youngest one's tracks, which are 9.5 now, and then we found these 6-inch tracks, and that, we're really excited about that. Really excited about that. It just gives us more time to work the habituation process with one particular individual. And of course, that's assuming that, they stay in that area, and we get to continue this process.
Well, I think it's conceivable to believe that at least you're going to have 3 or 4 more years with that, whatever creature is leaving the 6-inch, unless they just all pick up and say, this place sucks, we're leaving, and we're all moving away as a family. It seemed to make sense that at least the little one's going to be there for at least 3 or 4 more years, that you can watch it grow and try to get comfortable, make it comfortable, being around you.
Yeah. We actually, this last weekend, I was actually called by somebody, and there was tracks found 37 minutes from me. And I went and met them. They took me out to this mud flat where these tracks were found. And it was, there were 6-inch tracks, 10-inch tracks, and 11.5-inch tracks. And they were in a mud flat where the water was low, and lots of mussel shells, broken mussel shells laying around. And, we believe that that's what they're doing when they go out into these mud flats, is collecting mussels. We can't say that positively, but there's possible evidence that shows that. So it's, there's a lot to it, and there's a lot that we've done, a lot of data that we've collected, and we're just now getting to a point where we can turn it over to people who are smarter than us and let them think about it. And it's allowing me and Randy to just focus on the research, collecting the data, and we just now we're just going to be able to pass it off.
Well, it is refreshing to hear people that are doing this. That it's refreshing to hear you say, this is kind of what we think, but it's going to change. It could change according to what we discover. And you're saying we could pass this stuff off to people that are smarter than us, because so many times you just hear people that, well, this is what this is, and this is what it's going to do. And we're just looking for evidence that backs that up, what we believe up. And it's kind of like you're like a totally opposite approach of a lot of people that I hear talk about this, is that you're so open-minded, you're willing to try anything because you just really are discovering everything seems brand new,
Yeah. I personally don't listen to a lot of other people's experiences when it comes to researchers, because I don't want to taint my mind with other people's ideas and ideologies. So that when something happens or we get some new data, we don't have, it creates more of a mess for us, basically. We want to go off of the data and not take that data and stretch into something that we already think, or something that we've heard elsewhere, just like, for instance, for years, Meldrum has been showing that these things have what he calls a possible mid-tarsal joint, which allows them to flex. A lot of times the word in the middle of the foot is used, but that's not where the mid-tarsal joint would be. It would be just in front of the shin bone or the ankle. What we're finding is these things have a medial longitudinal arch, a lateral longitudinal arch, and an interior transverse arch, just like we do. Like the tracks that we're getting, especially the juvie tracks, are showing arches. And that's kind of a big deal, because all apes have a mid-tarsal joint and all humans have arches and no mid-tarsal joint. So if we're correct and these tracks are juvenile Sasquatch tracks, and they're showing that these things have 3 arches just like we do, that means possibly that they are a human primate versus a non-human primate. There's evidence that says that these things may have language. And if that's the case, that would also make them a human primate versus a non-human primate. It would also mean that their throats are set up like ours. Our oral cavity and our throat basically have a 1-to-1 ratio, and they're almost set up in a 90-degree angle, whereas apes have a 1-to-2 ratio. So their throat is, you have to double the length of their throat to create the space of their oral cavity. And that puts their voice box and their vocal cords right up behind their oral cavity, whereas ours is down in our throat because we have a 1-to-1 ratio. That's what allows us to have speech. And if these things have a language and have speech, that would also mean that they are a human primate versus a non-human primate. So it's things like this, little pieces of data like this that we're looking at that points us in a direction. Now we may discover some data that makes us go, well, maybe these things are apes, and we're not correct with what we're seeing. This is why we are now giving our stuff to other people that are smarter than us.
Well, I would like to I'd like to have before we get into some of the stuff that you guys are collecting, like the evidence and stuff you guys are collecting there now beside the footprints, I'd like to hear about your very first experience when you were just a kid. I read about that, and I was kind of intrigued, because I remember when I was that same, I think you were 10. So
Yes.
So I remember being that age and just being nuts over Bigfoot, but that was a long time ago. Yeah, I just kind of want to see what this experience was like for you, and if you wouldn't mind sharing it with everybody.
Sure. So it was 1984. I was 10 years old. I was out on my aunt and uncle's property. I went out there during the summer a lot to hang out. They watched me during the summer while my parents worked, and so I would be out there, and we played in the woods a lot. It was outside of West Plains, Missouri, just all forest out in the country. And my uncle had this dog named Sam, and he liked chasing deer, he chased cows and whatnot. Got in trouble sometimes, but it was it it wasn't out of the norm for him to drag in like a doe by the hind leg or something, and or a small fawn or something. But anyway, one day he was missing, and typically my uncle could step out on the back porch and whistle out into the woods, and he would show up, within 15 minutes usually. It didn't happen that day, so I went out into the woods to look for Sam and holler for him. So the woods kind of run east and west, the tree line, and there's a small field in between that was fenced off with barbed wire, and out in the middle is a pond. So I cross this field and I go into the woods, maybe 20 yards, and I'm hollering for Sam, this dog. And I start walking towards the east, and I don't know, I probably walked 75, 100 yards, and then I started getting this real uneasy feeling, and I didn't understand it at the time, but I stopped, and I actually started focusing on this one particular tree, and it was as if I knew something was behind that tree, and I had no idea what it was. At the time, I had never heard of Bigfoot or Sasquatch, so I'm standing there trying to figure out what is giving me this crazy feeling that I'm having, and this thing steps out from behind the tree, like literally just like one side step out, and it stands there, and literally we look at each other. Like, I was really asphyxiated on the eyes and the face, so I didn't get a lot of detail of the front of the body, because I was, I don't know, maybe in shock. Thinking back on it, I didn't feel like I don't remember feeling like I was in shock, but anyway, I was asphyxiated on this thing's face, and looking back at it as it was looking at me, it didn't show any facial expression. It was just straight faced. It was maybe a 10 to 15 second encounter. It turned around calmly and walked off towards the southeast, I believe. It kind of went up this little hill, and as it disappeared over the hill, and I sat there the whole time watching it walk away. I don't remember experiencing fear in the moment, but as soon as that thing topped the hill and disappeared, it was like I completely broke down and freaked out. I did a U-turn, took off running, came out of the wood line, hit it through the fence, and I'm like halfway across the field, and I'm already like crying, and I look up, and my dad's vehicle is sitting in the driveway. So I start screaming and yelling for my dad. By the time I get to the fence near the house and I'm coming through the fence, my dad's coming out and hears me yelling, and he meets me out off the porch, and I run into his arms and I'm screaming, or not screaming, but I'm crying and freaking, and he's just trying to get me to calm down, wanting to know what happened, what's wrong. And so he kind of calmed me down. We went inside, went into the bedroom, and he's asking me, what happened, and so I told him, I told him what had happened. And of course, I'm trying to describe this thing, not knowing what to call it. So he's just listening to me describe this thing. And I described it as like adult size at the time, but looking back on it, it wasn't adult size. It was most likely a juvenile. It was probably, I don't know, maybe 5 foot tall, 4.5 to 5 foot tall. May have been a little taller. It's hard to say because I was young and I was a kid and it's been so long ago, but I'm trying to explain to my dad what just happened and what I just saw. And my dad is, basically it felt like he didn't believe me. He's trying to convince me that I was seeing shadows, and just freaked myself out. And of course, I saw a living, breathing, hair-covered thing, that looked like a hair-covered person almost. So
yeah, shadow doesn't normally walk from the tree line over a hill.
Right. And I told him all of that, and he still, just tried to convince me that I was seeing shadows and scared myself basically. And so basically it was kind of left at that. I was disappointed because my dad, I could tell he didn't believe me, and he never like gave me any crap over it or teased me or anything like that, because I'm sure he could tell that that I was really bothered by it. I mean, looking back on it, it was a traumatic experience for me. Like I quit playing in the woods. I wouldn't, I quit hunting. Like I was already into hunting at that point, and had no interest in hunting anymore, and kind of changed my whole view of being in the woods and enjoying the serenity of it.
Well, so did you ever talk to your aunt and uncle about it, or not? Did they ever hear?
No, not till years later. And my dad had mentioned it to him. Of course, all my dad told him was I got spooked and got scared. That was it.
So what did they say about it?
Later on, after I got older, I brought it up to my uncle and asked him if my dad had ever told him about it, and he had never had any experiences or anything there. My dad had, like I said, my dad had just told him I'd gotten spooked, and my uncle actually had a possible encounter in Oregon. Years after that, he moved to Oregon to the Bay. They lived kind of on the base of Mount St. Helens, and he had an experience there. And then they ended up moving to Tennessee, and just west of the Smoky Mountains. And they go up in the Smoky Mountains and camp, and they've had a couple experiences up there, actually, just audible stuff, yells and roars and whoops that they've heard off in the distance. But they're open to it. My aunt and uncle are, but he'd never had any experiences out there. And they hunted the property and stuff. We pretty large property, and it was all surrounded by a few other private properties in national forest. So a lot of area.
So that definitely changed your life, obviously. I mean, I'm sure that's something that you never forgot. And did that lead or not? I guess, am I wrong? Or
well, oddly enough, I got to a point. I don't know when this happened, but I got to a point where it was fairly quick, maybe within a year. I just got to a point where I like put it in a lockbox in the back of my head.
Mm-hmm.
Just never really thought about it again. And, I don't know if I, blocking it out or what, but at some point I just locked it away and just didn't think about it anymore.
Wow, really? Because, like I said, when I was at that age, um, you know, I would have been, at least in my mind, so excited to see something like that and experience it. But I guess until you're 10 years old and right there and actually seeing it, you don't realize how terrifying it could possibly be. You know what I'm saying? I mean, in Ohio growing up, we didn't think there was any chance you're ever going to see a Bigfoot. So of course you were like, oh man, I'd love to see one, but there's never a chance to see one.
Yeah.
So and I'm sure, I think you're much younger than me, so by the time you were probably 10 years old, there was probably a little more, Bigfoot might even have been a little more mainstream, um, than what it was even when I was a kid. Because we had In Search Of and the Patterson Gimlin film, and that was about it.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything else.
Crazy enough, as a kid, I don't remember seeing like anything as far as Bigfoot and Sasquatch.
Really.
Yeah, I didn't watch a lot of TV when I was a kid. I was in martial arts. Like I was started in martial arts when I was 6. So I would literally I would go to school and I would leave school if I had sports or something. I would go to practice, but then after school, after that I would go immediately to the gym. And I trained 5 nights a week for years. And so I didn't watch a lot of TV. I wasn't exposed to a lot of stuff like that. So I didn't really discover Sasquatch and Bigfoot till I was in my teens, in my mid-teens probably.
See, there's the difference. You're going and doing martial arts and being disciplined, and I'm just going home eating, like a candy bar and watching Laverne and Shirley and Happy Days reruns. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah,
that's why you're Bigfooter of the year and I'm not. because of your discipline. So at what point then so how do you make this leap where you've put this experience, locked it away? When does it happen again for you that you want to get into doing this research, and then maybe you open that lockbox back up and start revisiting that experience that you had?
Yeah, so 2013. It was actually July 1st, 2013. The day before, just on a whim, I told my wife and kids, "Hey, let's find a place and go hike tomorrow. Let's go on a hike, get out and enjoy some nature. Maybe find a spot with a creek." And so I got on Google Earth and started looking around. I wanted to find a place where they're not like your just normal hiking areas where people go typically, something a little more secluded. So I found a spot and we showed up the next morning. I think it was early. We got out and we took off hiking, and we got a ways out, and mile and a half, maybe 2 miles, and we're walking down the trail, and the kids, I've got 3 boys, and they were out in front of us, and me and my wife are walking beside each other, and all of a sudden I get this feeling, and like, crazy enough, I recognized it immediately. It was because I hadn't felt it since I was 10 years old, right? It was the exact same feeling or vibe. And I was like, oh no, please don't let this be, and basically I just kind of, I stepped in off the trail, and I just started scanning the woods, and off to my right was this thicket, 30 yards away, maybe 40 yards. And I could see these heads sticking up. And the three for sure that were real prominent that I could, and then a possible fourth. And immediately was like, oh no, it's like I got this feeling, just an overwhelming feeling of dread, like, oh my gosh, so I immediately go back out. I come out of the woods, get back on the trail with my wife. I holler at the kids, hey, let's go. It's time to go. We need to turn around and start hiking back out. And my wife, in the moment, she could tell that something was wrong, but she went with it instead of, asking. She just went with it, trusted me, and we take off hiking back out. And I was just I didn't want the kids to be aware of what I was feeling in that moment. So I was just trying to act normal, but my wife she could tell. So we get back to the creek that we had crossed, and we stopped there and took some pictures and whatnot. And anyways, we stopped and took pictures. A few times we were pointed back down the trail, and there's some odd things, in those pictures. And we get home, and as soon as we're away from the kids, my wife immediately, hits me. She's like, what was that all about? What happened? What happened out there? So like in that moment, I had to, well, first of all, I had to tell my wife something that I'd never told her, right? That I had had this experience when I was 10. And then I had to tell her that I just had another experience with the same thing out on that trail, that I'd just seen these things. And then I had to hope to hell that my wife would believe me, like the person that I love and trust the most. Is she going to believe me when I tell her that I seen this thing when I was 10 and that I just seen possibly 4 more? It was that was probably the hardest part of all of this, was trying to open up to my wife and tell her this crazy stuff, and hope that she didn't think that her husband was crazy.
The worst part is as you're saying that, is I think about how many people think it's so easy to lie to their wife. The hardest part is telling her the truth. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah, man. It was
and I'm by no means
weird moment.
condoning,
It was it was terrible.
I'm by no means condoning lying to your wife. I'm just saying that.
Right. I got
So,
you. I follow you there.
so how did she react? So obviously she believed you.
Yeah. Lucky enough, she didn't doubt me. She believed me. I showed her, like, while I was in the woods, I snapped a few pictures, and I showed her the pictures, and luckily she believed me. And I was at that point, like, I knew that if I didn't get back out there, that I was going to be ruined as far as enjoying the woods and whatnot. And as an adult, like, I became an information junkie in my mid-teens, and just like, I love information. I love reading and learning new things, and I'm into a lot of stuff. And so I made the decision right then and there that the next morning at sunup I was going to be back out there, and I was going to go right to where those things were. So that's what I did. And for the next 3 days, I was out there from sunup to sundown, and literally, like, I took time off from work. I just had to, basically, I had to go face this thing that that I had ran into when I was a child. And I didn't want it to affect me and how I live my life. So I decided I wanted to go out and see what these things were, see if I could get close to them. And July 4th, literally, like, right before sundown, I'm racing back to the town that I live in, and like stopping to get fireworks and get home so that I can have July 4th with my kids. I just dove in head first, and it just turned into craziness from thereafter.
So then where did you, now is this the same piece of land where you saw those 4 heads that then you started, did you continue investigating there? Or I mean, how then did you get to where you're at the piece of property that you guys are at now and having what I would call a lot of success in your research?
So basically, I started putting together, for lack of a better word, like a system that I thought may work to try to habituate those things. And I spent 3 years out there and was baiting these things, and the juveniles started following me on these hikes that I'd set up, and like eventually it turned into like semi interaction, I guess you could say. And at one point I'm an ex MMA coach also. I kickboxed, Thai boxed, and got into MMA, and then retired and opened a gym and coached. So I have one of my pro fighters. You develop a trust with these fighters because they go into the ring or the cage, and they're relying on you. And if they completely trust you, they'll listen to you as a coach on the outside of the ring, right? So you develop this trust. So I thought, I'm going to take one of my guys out with me. And one of them in particular, he was one of my pro fighters, and he was ex-military. So I thought, this guy's the perfect person, right? So I take him out, and we start having these things happen. And we see one from 75, 80 yards in a tree, and he's not understanding what he's seeing till it takes off down the tree. And then he's like kind of freaking out, trying to decide if he just saw a bear or what. And long story short, I got him within about 30 yards of one of the juveniles, and I decided at that point that I was going to get video that day, so that I could tell people about this, because at this point I hadn't been telling people about it. I didn't want to be the crazy Bigfoot guy, And so I took off running after this juvenile to get video, and we ended up catching up to it, and we were probably 40 foot from it, and it stuck its head out of this thicket, and he looked at it, and he looked back at me and looked back at it, and it turned around and bolted on all fours for a little ways, and then went from all fours to a standing run without slowing down at all. And he looked at me and just turned like ghost white. His eyes watered. He like leaned over holding his stomach. Thought he was going to throw up. Like he was almost like in shock. Even though I told him and explained to him what I was going to take him out to see. And after that day, everything basically stopped. Like I was still finding their tracks here and there, but all the interaction completely stopped. And I kept on out there for another year or so, and finally kind of gave it up. I still go back to that spot occasionally, and I do believe that they still come through that area, but they're not hanging out in that area as they were back then. So I had a little downtime, and then one day randomly, somebody that I knew from my past reached out to me, and they're like, "Hey, I saw you on this website. I didn't know you was into Bigfoot. I got this friend that owns this property, and all this weird stuff's happening, and I think it may be Bigfoot. Would you be willing to go out?" And I said, "When's the soonest we could go?" And he said, "Tomorrow." And I said, "I'm in." So the next morning we went out. He took me out to this property, and they wanted me to basically see if I could get to the bottom of what was happening. The property owner at the time wasn't sure if he had poachers or what. He was finding structures, and he was tearing them down, thinking that poachers. He's got a ton of deer on his property. I mean, a ton. It's ridiculous. So he thought poachers were coming in his property at night, and he was finding these deer kills occasionally, but the heads were still on the. So he was confused. And so he's tearing down these structures and whatnot, and stuff started happening around his cabin, and that's when they pulled me into it. So we go out, and we spent 8 hours on the property that day just hiking throughout the property so I could kind of get to know the lay of the land. And crazy enough, first day out there, I felt like we were being followed, and I turned around and spotted one. The guy that took me out there, he hadn't seen one before, and he had been kind of hiking around the property, checking stuff out, over the past few months before that. And I turned around, pointed it out to him. He got to see it. And from that point forward, I've been on that property. That was 5 years ago.
So back to that last property. So you kind of feel then that by chasing that juvenile, that's kind of what stopped some of the interaction you were having. Like they lost a little bit of trust in what you were, your intentions were, maybe.
It killed my predictability. Like I feel like what's enabled me to do the things that I've done is just being predictable. And there's ways to go about that, like proving yourself to be predictable. And that's what my whole idea was based on, trying to habituate these things. And that completely broke that predictability that I'd built. And that point forward, nothing, absolutely no interaction whatsoever.
So how was your the guy that was with you? Like, I mean, obviously he's not asking. It doesn't sound to me like he's wants any part of what he witnessed. Is he?
Oh,
not?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I was hoping that he would like become my research partner. I wanted to really go deep into this, and he didn't want any part of it. He didn't even want to talk about it for a couple months. Like in the gym, he would just avoid the topic, and he was uneasy about it every time I'd bring it up. So I just quit bringing it up, and because we had to focus on being coach and fighter, and he just didn't want to think about it. So I enabled that and quit bringing it up to him. Now we can talk about it and discuss it, and he's okay with it now. But early on, he really had an issue with it. Like I took him out and showed him something that wasn't supposed to be real,
Which in the limited knowledge I have of MMA, but you still consider those guys, men and women, are entering a ring or a space where they very well could lose their life if they're not properly trained and ready for what's going to happen. And you'd think that they would have no fear, or at least they could overcome what fear they have. And then to see that guy basically fall to pieces, because he doesn't.
And he was ex-military. He was ex-military too.
Well, yeah. Okay. Even more, because then you're wondering, well, because I got to be honest, any military guy I talk about or talk to, even if it's not about Bigfoot, in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, what have you seen and experienced that the rest of us regular Joes couldn't imagine?
Yeah.
There's got to be some. They have to get a level of experiencing things and knowing things that just the regular people aren't exposed to.
Right.
And you would think that they would be able to digest something like that. But as it happens, I do talk, I've had military guys on the show that, when I first talked to them, they can't grasp their experience, because it's like you said, that guy's saying that's not supposed to be real. There's not supposed to be something that can take off on all fours and then not miss a beat and run off on two legs.
Exactly.
Stuff like that. That's.
I mean, to an extent, it was like a paradigm shift for him. Something that he was led to believe and told was true was suddenly false. Here's these things that he got to see with his own eyes. He got to hear them. He got to see their tracks, and it affected him. It affected his whole paradigm in a sense.
Now, were you in that instance? Were you able to collect video and other evidence that that you set out to try to get?
I got a picture of it. At the time, this was back in 2014, and at the time I didn't have like any awesome cameras or anything, and I was literally just using my phone. Like I wasn't out there to try to prove these things were real at the time. I was out there to figure out what the heck they were, what I was dealing with, and what I was experiencing. I was wanting answers. So I wasn't out like trying to prove it or anything. The pictures that I was taking with my phone, I was taking those just to bring them home and show them to my wife and eventually my kids. It's like all my kids know these things are real. My oldest son has seen them. He started going out hiking with me, and he's seen them on 3 occasions himself.
Holy smokes! How is that played into his growing up? Like what his belief system? Like what? Because I gotta believe, like you as a kid, even though you didn't have a background and knew anything about him, it changed kind of how you saw things, at least at that point in time. And no matter how much you've told him that, hey, this is what Dad goes out and does, how prepared is he still the first time he sees one?
Like he was okay with it. He was okay with it.
Really?
I'd already, like I'd already been out there at this point for, I don't know, a year before I let him come out with me. And, I felt like I didn't feel like he'd be in any danger per se. So he was mentally prepared. Like to him, you got to remember he's at the time, oh gosh, I want to say he was 10 or 11 years old, and um he's just believing what Dad tells him, and I'm telling him that there's nothing to be scared of, and explaining to him what I think about him and whatnot. And the first time that he saw one, he was a little taken aback, like more excited. Have you ever heard of buck fever?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for him it was kind of like buck fever the first time he saw one. He got all excited and is breathing hard and his heart's pumping fast, like adrenaline shot that he got or something. Um, he researched with me, or I should just say hiked with me, and did what I do for about maybe 8 months. And then we were in this particular holler one day, and what I believe was the male roared from down the holler, and the sound in this particular holler like carries really hard. And this sound, that roar, came up through the holler, and when it hit us, you could almost feel it. And it freaked him out for some reason. So at that point, he wanted no more to do with it. Like he had already seen them 3 times, seen one of them 3 times, and then that happened and it freaked him out. So he quit going out with me. He's 18 now and actually kind of getting back into it. He goes hiking with me sometimes, and he's okay with it. He's not scared. He knows if these things were going to do something, they would have already done it to me.
I mean, yeah. I mean, your experience with the juveniles. How big are these juveniles? I mean, we know how big their feet are, but how big are they as creatures, height wise and weight wise, do you think?
It's hard to say. I saw in my old area, I saw the what I considered to be the adult female one time, and I snapped a picture of her. And when I came back through, I went over to that spot where she'd been standing. There was a tree limb that was like there, her head was right under, and that tree limb was at 7 foot, and she was just a little under that. So, she was 6 something, the upper 6 foot something. Hard to say exactly, but I never saw the male from that research area. I never saw him like standing in a position where I could get a height on him. I caught him sitting down in a blind one time. And then another time he came in behind me in this one spot, and but he was like in a thicket, and he was peeking out of the thicket through a V in a down tree. So all I could really see, like you could see the mass of his body in the thicket, but all I could see clearly was like from the top lip up in this V. So I never really got an opportunity to see the adults other than that one time with the female. The juvies, And this is just going off of the tracks that I'm finding, and when I have seen them and been able to kind of judge their height. And this goes for both areas, both research areas. Um, when their feet are 9 to 10 inches, they're about I'm 5'8", and they seem to be about my size when their feet are 9 to 10 inches long.
And well, and just considering the their mass, probably at the same height as you, they're probably twice as big.
They're not.
Yeah,
That's not the case. That's not what we're seeing.
they're
What we're
not.
No, I mean
Holy
they're a
moly.
little they're a little bigger than us, but they're not like massively built like the adults.
Hmm.
I can't say this for sure, but our idea is that, like, say after the females start ovulating is when they really like hit a growth spurt, and the young males, we would figure when they hit puberty, it's the same thing. They start, their mass starts coming into play. And we're seeing that in the tracks too. As the tracks grow, they flatten out more.
So I wonder, and I wonder if you had to tangle with a juvenile, how that would end up.
So think of like even a chimp. A chimp could rip us apart, right?
Oh yeah. That's what
Their muscle fiber is different, and they're just built differently than we are. So I would imagine that it would, probably be the same for these things. Looking at the build of the adults, I've only seen the male in the 400 on thermal, but I did get to see the male in my old research area, and it was built like a bodybuilder. I mean, he was huge. He was super thick. His chest was huge. His arms were huge. Like he was cut. You could see muscle through the hair.
which kind of, I mean, when you stop and think about it, you just kind of wonder how something gets that big, living that hard scrabble of a life, really out in the wild. Then, having to fight every day probably for food and shelter, and nothing's probably super easy.
Not where we're at. Where we're at, they're not fighting for food. This property and this whole area, where this property is loaded with deer, um, loaded with all kinds of like prairie birds. There's tons and tons of berries on the property. I mean, just huge, like half-acre plots of berries. Just like thickets of them. There's pawpaw trees. There's apple trees, peach trees. Like there's a lot of food source on this property and in the surrounding area.
Holy smokes! This place sounds fantastic.
We didn't know there were pawpaw trees on the property until we started finding the seeds in their scat. And then I went and we didn't even know what the seeds were. It took like a week to figure out exactly what the seeds were. And, I hadn't even heard of pawpaws at the time. So I wasn't looking there to compare. And when we finally matched the seeds up, pawpaw trees typically grow near water. So I started running the creek on both sides, and we had pawpaw trees on the opposite side of the creek, just like 800 yards from camp.
Wow. So I take back everything I said about this family unit. Then they seem like they're living in a lap of luxury.
Yeah, I could live on this property and make it.
Wow. But I mean, you understand what I'm saying, though. Is like when I hear these things are ripped to shreds, like look like bodybuilders, it's like how do they get that big? Because they're not out there working out. Okay, they're eating, they're trying to survive, and you think they would, their bodies wouldn't necessarily be built to look like they were trying out for the Cowboys or something.
Well, yeah, you would assume that their calorie intake would have to be huge.
Yeah, yeah. If you're built like that, if you're not, if you're a little bit pudgy or you're a little bit, you got some extra fat on you. I hate to break it to you, everybody out there. I don't have to eat a whole bunch of calories every day because I've already got some stored up.
Right.
It's the people who are ripped to shreds like that who have to eat a huge amount of calories to maintain that muscle mass and look like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
And it's not to say that all of them are built like that either.
Mhm.
The male out in the 400, or what we believe is the male, um, he's large, but we just got to see him on thermal, but on the thermal he didn't look nearly as thick and as wide as the one that was in my old research area. So, who's to say? Who's to say, I guess. And another thing we're seeing, like you always hear about the conical heads.
Yeah,
Um, we're not seeing conical heads on all of them. Some of them have round heads.
that's interesting. But I mean, I just think if you want to talk about like capturing some of the somewhat Sierra sounds that you guys have heard, that that made me think when we were talking about that off the air, is that how much different these creatures are, um, just like people. I mean, that's the part that really strikes me, as if we think these are human like. They do, like, some have conical heads, some have round heads, some seem to have a language, some don't. Because people are out there researching them in active areas and don't come up with you know, the sound of language. They get mimic, like animal mimics and different sounds and whistles and stuff instead of a language. It just seems like there's such a varying degree of types of these creatures depending where you're at.
Right, right. Yeah, even when you go, like if you look at the geographical locations where these things are seen a lot, like if you northwest, um, a lot of the sightings up there describe them as being bigger and bulkier. And then you go to Florida and they have, what they call the swamp apes. They seem to have longer hair and be a little thinner. And then like here in the Ozarks, it seems like we got kind of a mix, of
Mm-hmm.
like what I get. People reach out to me often down in this area and, give me sighting reports and stuff. And like they're not all looking the same. The descriptions are varying by quite a lot, actually. So it's if I had to say, that would be my guess, that these things are, if the data is correct that we're looking at, that's showing these things may be a possible human primate, then I would say that they would probably be like us, and there's going to be a lot of variations in what they look like. A ton.
Yes. Yeah, I couldn't argue that at all. I couldn't argue that.
One of
So
them, actually, there's in my old research area, the two juveniles that used to mess with me and interact with me, one of them had no hair on its face and it actually had a hairline, just like you and I do. I used to call him Elvis. I nicknamed him Elvis at one point because of the way his hairline was, but you could see his ears. The hair on his body was thinner, like you could see his skin through the hair on his body. And he was thinner than the others. Like when the first time I saw him, I actually wasn't sure if I was seeing like a homeless person or somebody that was living out in the woods, secretly. Like I wasn't sure what I was seeing because it didn't look like the others, but it seemed to be a part of that family group, which was what threw me off in the beginning. And so I realized pretty quick early on in 2013 that there's probably a lot of variances, because what I eventually put together was that group was a family unit, and I was seeing all these variations within 5 individuals that were probably a family group. So I would expect that everywhere.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Um, well, so do you want to fill everybody in on some of the really cool stuff that is going on at the 400? I guess that's your term for the place where you're doing the research, right? You call it the 400.
Yeah. A lot of people are going to say, "Oh, how could a group of Sasquatch, live on 400 acres?" Well, we call it the 400. That's the private property part of it that we do most of our work on. But there's another 700 acres on one side. There's like a 300-acre private property on another area near it. There's a big portion of it is national forest. So it's not just 400 acres that we have access to and that we've been doing this on, but over this 5-year period, we've drawn them into this 400-acre area. That's where we first discovered them, but we've been able to draw them in, so we don't have to go like hike into these other areas and on these other properties to work on the habituation. They come to us now. And I know this sounds crazy, but like, I just have to tell it like it is. It is what it is. And, basically we have a camp, like a base camp set up, and we've actually moved it at one point, and we're getting ready to move it again. But it's like we move camp when we get to certain areas within our system, and we do it for our advantage, basically. Like where our base camp is right now, we're back to the creek, so we have a creek on the north side, we have a ridge on the south side, and then we have thicket around us. So it gives this buffer zone, right? If they're feeling real uneasy, they can stay on the other side of the creek, or they can watch us from the ridge behind us. Or, if they're feeling real good, they can come in around the thickets in camp that are around camp. So once we get to a point, we move camp, and where we move camp to the next time only has one area where they can get in close without being seen. So it takes all those buffer zones out, if that makes sense. So if they come in around camp at that point, there's only one area they can come in without being seen. So it narrows down where we need to look, right? And we are baiting them. That's all part of this also. And this is how we, one of the reasons we think that they started coming in around camp. And just, it seems like they're interested in us and what we're doing. And me and Randy in the past have called them people watchers. It seems as though they enjoy just hanging out and watching people. Maybe if they're in an area, they're watching us for safety reasons. But it seems to be that way. But over time, over this 5-year period, I've brought in other people. I got Randy Harrington involved. I've tried a few other researchers over time, and it just didn't work out. We eventually brought in biologist Dan Nedrolo, and we went through this system, and we got to a point where they would come in around camp, our second camp, where there was only one place to come in unseen. When we would see them on thermal, I would walk out through the thicket and try to, basically Randy would, and the guys at camp will watch them on thermal on a screen. I go out with nothing, basically. Randy's job is to talk to me through our headsets and lead me to within 8 or 10 foot of where these things are. So I stop, sit down, turn my back to them, and, try to communicate, throw the bait, toss the bait in the general direction that they are. And the last time it happened, before this summer, I was within 8 or 10 foot of one. And what had happened is Randy is talking to me. He's telling me, go forward, you're almost there. And then suddenly I come out of the backside of the thicket, and Randy says to me, "Oh crap, you're right where it was." So I'm like, "Oh crap." So I turn around and I'm trying to judge where this thing may have went. And as I kind of face the northwest back towards the thicket, this thing starts doing the samurai chatter to me. I say to me because, like, when you listen to the Sierra sounds, these things that have some distance between Ron Moorhead and the other guys, and they're yelling this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
This was like calm and collected, as if me and you were talking now, right? So it wasn't yelled. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. It caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting it. Like I'd already built myself up to this point where I was okay with walking out and trying to be close to these things. When that happened, it sent a chill down my spine, caught me off guard. And Randy and Dan and the other guy that was there was like, we don't know what that meant. Pull out, come back to camp. So I come back to camp, and that day and night, that everything started about 2 o'clock that day, but that whole night was just unbelievable. And now the two juvies that we were doing that stuff with are not on the property anymore. We're not finding their tracks, and we're finding the tracks of there was a individual with 6-inch tracks. Its tracks are now 9.5 inches, and there's a new individual that has 6-inch tracks. So now we're going back through this process that we've already been through with these other two juveniles who aren't showing up anymore, and we're kind of rehabituating these two younger ones now. Mainly focusing long term, we're going to be focusing on one with the 6-inch tracks because that gives us more habituation time with it. And with any luck, the one that has the 9.5-inch tracks now watched the other two interacting with us. So, we're this summer we already collected some thermals. We collected we did not catch the samurai chatter on recorders the first time it happened. This summer we actually captured it, and we gave that to Scott Nelson. He has it, and he's studying it right now. He's breaking it down into different phonetics and seeing what he can match to the Sierra sounds, if any. And if he can, that'll be a big deal, because he's been waiting for something to come along that matches the Sierra sounds for a long time. And if he can't pull language out of it, which is what we need, and thus far what he's seeing, without slowing it down, is it sounds like the chatter that was happening in the Sierra sounds, not the actual language. So we just have to do better. We have to collect audio of the language, that he can pull apart and match up. And we're working on that now as we speak. We have these recorders that look like logs that Randy built. So we can just take these small logs out and just set them down randomly, and they just blend in with everything. They have real bark on them, and they literally just look like a small log. So these areas where we're collecting these sounds, we're not just getting that type of stuff. Like, we're not getting chatter. We're not getting just that. We're getting all kinds of crazy stuff. It would take me hours. It would take me hours to tell you all the things that we've collected in this one area where all these sounds are happening.
So when you're out there standing, and this thing starts talking to you, or trying to communicate, or just it's saying, so I guess I should choose my words carefully so somebody listening doesn't say, they're not trying, whatever, people can pick everything you say apart. But
yeah,
what I'm wondering is so at a time out there, you got to know that the adults in this situation are not far from wherever these kids are.
Yeah. So let me hit that topic real quick. Okay.
Yeah.
The first time Dan Nedrolo came out, we got him out onto the property. He drove down from Wisconsin on his own dime to come out and see what was happening, right? We got him there at, I believe it was 2:30. It was either 2:30 or 3:30. I believe it was 2:30. And at 3:30, we had him 1,000 yards from camp, and we had a juvenile pinned down in high grass, and it couldn't go anywhere without being seen. Like, literally, it was behind a big patch of grass, and to the right and to the left was none. Like, it would have to expose itself. And we were 100 foot from it. And it was the first time that I did my quote unquote walk out to one of these things. And Dan got to see that the first time that we tried it. And the next morning we went back to, and that's a whole, I'd have to tell that story, but the next morning we went back to do a recreation of it, and put me in its spot and all this stuff, and take daytime photos and video of all this stuff that it where it had occurred and whatnot. And after we got done with that, we went out and started casing the thicket behind where this happened, and the mother's tracks were about 30 foot, 25, 30 foot behind. While this was happening, I had a rock thrown at me, and it was about a 15-minute ordeal. And the juvie that was on the ground, laying down on its belly, trying to hide, clacked its teeth, or I can't say that positively, but that's what it sounded like. It was very loud, but that's the only thing that my mind could attribute it to, is it clacked its teeth together. And then a rock came flying out and landed right beside me, and I immediately turned and walked back to the guys. Like, that was my sign to vacate, right? That they'd had enough. So we determined from the trajectory of the rock and where we found the large female's tracks in the thicket, she was just out of view of the thermal, and she had thrown that rock, most likely. So she was there. She actually watched, we assume that she watched this happen. She watched me walk out. That when I first went out, I went about halfway. You got to remember, this is the first time I did this, and I'll add a funny little tidbit in here. I walk out, it's about 100 feet away from us. I walk out about 50 foot, and the whole idea was, I'm going to go out about halfway, sit down with my back to it, and that's it, the first time, right? I go out, I turn back towards Randy and Dan, and I go to sit down, and my body wouldn't let me. Like, the bottoms of my feet did not want to allow my butt to touch the ground.
Oh, boy.
And so I'm sitting here in a squatting position, trying to talk myself into sitting down completely, and I just couldn't do it in that moment. So I spent a few minutes out there, and Randy's just telling me how this thing is reacting, because it's popping its head up above the grass, to see what's happening. And at that point, he's like, it's moving faster. It's popping its head up and down faster. It looks like it's nervous. So I walked back to the guys, and then I told Randy, this could be the only time that we ever get a chance to do this. I'm going to see how close I can get. And I ended up getting about 7-8 foot from it. And I hit it with the flashlight. I hit its face with the flashlight 3 times. And anyway, it was a crazy experience. But yes, when the juvies are out around camp doing what they do with us, it seems as though the mother is always around, like keeping an eye on things.
Wow. So when you got up to that one that close and hit its face, does it take off and just run, or does it not move and you're just like, well, I'm going to have to leave? Like, what happened?
No. Like I said, this was a 15-minute ordeal. The first time I hit its face, the grass was like 2.5, 3 foot tall. Yeah. So it was like, it was pushing up, and it wasn't coming up completely above the grass, but like the lower you went in the grass, the thicker it was. And it was it was in October. It was a chilly night, and it was real damp outside. And so I was just seeing its face like through the upper part of the grass, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But okay. Here's an interesting tidbit: is you hear people saying, "Oh, their eyes are this color, their eyes were this color in the light." When light hits it, and blah blah blah. I hit its face 3 times with the flashlight that night, and every single time, the shine off the eyes was gold, and there was like a silver sheen in the center where the pupil would be.
That's an odd one. I don't know that I've heard too many people say that it was gold.
Yeah.
That's okay. Well, that's different. I don't know what that's all about for sure.
Me neither. Just an interesting tidbit. Like that's one of the things so after the teeth clack and the rock, I turned around, went back to the guys, and instead of hanging out, like we were really worried about pushing too hard because of my last adventure, in the old area that I was researching. And Randy was really, really worried about pushing too hard. Like he didn't even really want me to walk out to it that night. He was kind of against it. He didn't think it was the timing was right. Um, but I did it anyway. So overruled him on that evening. So we vacated and went back to camp, and evidently they followed us back down the ridge line. We're headed east, and the ridge line runs east and west. So we get back to camp. They go sit up underneath the canopy. I run out to the tent, and as I'm coming back over to the canopy where they are, as I'm walking by the side by side, a rock hits the other side of the side by side. So it came from the ridge, and we all stop and look up the ridge, kind of laugh, and I go sit down with the guys, and another rock flies down and hits the side by side again, and that was it. Like it was like they were telling us, we followed you back, you had us, we got you, or something, who knows, but they literally followed us back to camp that night. And Randy was stoked about that because he felt like, we didn't push too hard at that point.
Well, I'll tell you what, this sounds like every Bigfooter's dream, for sure.
It is.
I gotta be honest, I'm just gonna call Daniel out. I think he named you Bigfooter of the Year so he gets invited out to the property. I mean,
it's funny. It's funny you say that. We actually extended that possible offer out to him. We have, I don't want to say too much about it right now, but he may be coming to Southwest Missouri next year for another Bigfoot related thing. And we did throw at him the possibility of him getting out in the woods with us in the 400 while he's down in this area. So
that would be pretty cool.
I'll say that was after, I believe, when that invite happened. So it didn't have anything with Bigfooter.
Well, before we end up here, is there anything else that you'd like to kind of share with everybody, or tell them where your next focus is? What is something you'd really like to obviously you said you want to prove their existence without getting a body, but I mean, how close do you think you are to some of that stuff?
Yeah, I couldn't even tell you. We've had to kind of backpedal a little bit and go back and start doing some things that we've already done, because we're going back through the aspect of kind of habituating to new individuals to an extent. Mm-hmm. and going back through some of that process, not all the way back to the beginning, but back through some of that process, trying to get it back to where it was. And that's going to take some time, of course. The cool thing about it, though, is a few years ago, I had a Hollywood director reach out to me, and he was a Bigfoot junkie, kind of in the closet about it somewhat. And we've developed a friendship over the years, and I invited him out to experience these things for real, because he hasn't. And he believes he's a believer without the experience. But anyway, organically, it turned into a situation where we now have, he's a director producer. We have another director producer who is an Emmy Award winning documentary filmmaker, and her personal camera lady. The three of them are tagging along with us now, and we're filming a docu-series. Where it'll hit and when it'll hit, I have no idea, but she's done a lot of work. They've both done a lot of work with a lot of big people and a lot of big channels, so we don't know where it's going to come out and when, but eventually it will. And they're basically tagging along with us and having these experiences with us now. One of the directors came in as a skeptic, and she's still a skeptic at this point. They've only been out with us once thus far, but we're getting ready to start doing like 10 days a month. And we're filming in the process too. Me and Randy, film all the time too. But they're out with us for like 10 days a month, starting starting the first week of February, and our plan is to film through late this year, and see where it goes. You know, if it gets picked up, our hope is that we will not have to foot the bill to keep doing what we're doing, and that that'll help our situation. And like right now, it's like we can't do this full time because we all work and we all have jobs. Me and Randy, so it's not like we can just do this, go out for a month, and stay on the property. If we could do that, we would do that, and we have the ability to do that. Like we could live out there. Literally, we could stay out there nonstop for 6 months. And if we were put in a situation like that, I believe it would definitely pick up the pace of the things that are happening and the things that will happen. So we'll see what happens. Worst case scenario, people are going to get to see some of the things that we're collecting, the data that we're collecting. They're going to get to meet some of the academics that are working with us, and maybe see some of the processes they're going through with our data and whatnot. And people they'll get to tag along with us and see how we're doing it and what we're doing, and see what's actually happening while we're out there. The samurai chatter that we captured was just a couple months ago, and the film crew was with us.
That's kind of...
Yeah, Alex, who's one of the directors, he's listened to the Sierra sounds like multiple times over the years, and first time he comes in, he gets to hear that firsthand. And when it happened, it was actually me and him alone. So the situation we were in, real quick, everybody else and Randy were in the dried up creek bed, and they had launched the drone from there while me and Alex took off down the trail where we catch these things a lot. And Randy's flying ahead with the thermal drone looking for hot spots to tell me which thicket to go into. And on the way back, we actually lost communication on our headset. So Randy went on down to the destination and come back down the creek. We got to our destination and come back about a quarter of the way, and I stopped to do a thermal scan, and I'm watching a hot spot up on the ridge, but I can't see what it is because I'm looking through trees in a thicket. And he's filming, of course, and we captured that audio on video. So first time out with this, they're experiencing all these crazy things, and they're like in for the long haul. They're pumped. They're super excited about it. And all three of them are like, this is the best job we could ever take on, because like they're out having fun with us camping. It's almost like a vacation, except at night. We do stay up late, sometimes till sunup.
Well, hey, if you don't got to go to work the next day, you can do that, right? And that's the ultimate goal. That's the ultimate goal. I think that's everybody's ultimate goal. Whether you're Bigfooting or not, I think that's everybody's ultimate goal. Stay up all night and not have to go to work the next day. But
right. But my buddies are like, you're trying to get paid to go camping,
Hey, can you blame? I mean, I don't blame you. If I could get to do that, I don't know about camping. I'm not a big camper, but I would go out. I would go out at least once and check it out and see. See what was going on for sure, because it.
Well, me and Randy have purposely stayed away from the money side of this subject, because we don't want people to take that as these guys are doing it for the money and stuff. We've actually turned down money. We've had multiple people, we've had several people offer us thousands and thousands of dollars just to help us. But I always feel like if somebody was to give us money and we accepted it, that I owe them something, and I don't. Yeah. And they're trying to give us this money for free, but it's just how I would feel about it. I would feel like I owe them something. So I'm not good at taking money from people. So we've gotten into a situation where, like, this is a long-term project, of course, but if we were in a situation where we could do this full time and not have to worry about going to work every day and paying our bills, we think we could maybe get this done in a year or two.
Yeah,
at least get to a point where I'm getting close to them consistently. And I told you before we got on here that we're going to have some equipment made where I don't have to carry cameras and whatnot when I'm doing this. They'll all be on me. And so our hope is that all that will happen and play out, and people will get to see us go through that whole procedure of getting to that point.
Well, I know I, for one, am excited to see what you guys come up with, and I think all of our listeners, after hearing what it is you guys are doing out there and how close you're actually getting, I think it's just a matter of time. And it sounds to me like you might be the guy that you and Randy might be the two guys that do it, like that bring some of the most irrefutable evidence forward. So I think we're all excited. I think Daniel's onto something, so you got a lot to live up to.
Well, and that's one of the reasons I've ran under the radar for so long, because I don't like putting that kind of stuff on my shoulders, like having to live up to something, and so that's kind of the bad side of it. People are going to be looking more at us now, and really, and we've already got people, well, you guys are saying all this stuff, but you're not producing the evidence. Well, that's because our evidence and our data is going to academic people that are smarter than us, like you hear from the critical thinkers and the people that are, thinking along the lines of science. They expect you to go that route, the scientific route. And then when you do, they're hollering because you're not showing them anything. You're not, you're saying this stuff, but you're not proving it. So we just we don't care anymore. We don't care what people think. We don't care what they say. We've been doing what we're doing, running under the radar for so long. And that's what we're going to continue to do. We're just going to keep doing what we do, and at some point we'll either fail miserably or we won't. And either way, we're cool with it. Like me and Randy have already had so many great experiences that it could stop now and it'd all be worth it. And we'll continue doing it in other places, and because there are other places.
Well, I'm going to tell you what, I got money on it that you guys are going to succeed. And
I don't know if I'd do that. I'm not a betting man.
Well, I am, and I'm putting money on it. So there you go. But no, Shana, hey, again, congratulations on Bigfooter of the Year from Daniel and the Bigfoot Times. And thank you for coming on and sharing all this stuff, because this is I think people are like I said, they're going to hear this and they're going to have their eyes out for what it is that you're going to come up with next. Because I think you guys are on the verge of producing some legit, irrefutable evidence. That's what I think. So
I appreciate that.
So for what I think is worth, that's what I think. But I do appreciate you coming on and hanging out and sharing your experiences and what you're doing. And like I said, we'll be looking for some big things from you.
Awesome. Hopefully we can live up to that.
I think you will. So, well, thanks again.
Only time will tell, my friend. Only time will tell.
All right. Well, thanks again. And, we'll stay in touch.
Awesome. Appreciate you. And you have a good night.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the From the Shadows podcast. Until next time, never shy away from the darkness or what may be lurking in the shadows. We are out.
God!